On this edition of Great Lakes Now, we've been generating power with coal for over a century, and the ash that's left over can cause problems.
Coal ash has been contaminating groundwater on the shores of Lake Michigan here for over a decade.
Coal naturally contains lots of heavy metals.
But solutions are available.
We have an opportunity to do some really good things.
And more coal ash news with Northwestern University journalists who reported on the issue.
This program is brought to you by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation.
The Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
The Richard C. Devereaux Foundation for Energy and Environmental Programs at DPTV. The Polk Family Fund, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ward Detweiler. Welcome back to Great Lakes Now. This episode is part of a collaboration with Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, Media, Integrated Marketing Communications. There, journalism students have been working on a nationwide reporting project about coal ash and the issues surrounding it. The project is called Poisonous Ponds, Tackling a Toxic Legacy, and you can find it on the Great Lakes Now and Energy News Network websites. Diana Lean and Sarah I wrote about the threat coal ash poses to Lake Michigan. This story is based on their reporting.
Early in the morning, hours before dawn on December 22, 2008, a dam burst near the town of Kingston, Tennessee.
And 7.3 million tons of coal ash went gushing out. It covered over 300 acres. It went into two major waterways. It knocked homes off of their foundation.
It was a massive spill of toxic coal ash, a byproduct of burning coal at the power plant in Kingston. Freelance investigative journalist Jamie Satterfield covered the disaster. She said the cleanup effort began right away.
That stuff moved for several hours. So workers were summoned to come and hop on heavy equipment and get this stuff stopped.
More than 900 laborers were hired to clean up the mess. More than 50 of those workers have died, and those that survived are now suffering numerous ailments such as skin cancer, lung disease, heart problems, and memory loss. Coal ash contains mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and other heavy metals. The Tennessee coal ash disaster got a lot of people concerned about how the waste material is being stored at sites across the country. In 2015, new EPA rules went into effect regulating how power companies dispose of newly produced coal ash. But it's the coal ash from earlier times that remains a problem. The industrial history of the Great Lakes region was largely fueled by coal. Out of an estimated 600 coal ash ponds spread across the U.S., more than 200 are located around the Great Lakes region. So the question is, could a Tennessee type of catastrophe happen at one of these sites in the Great Lakes? The answer is, it already did, but on a smaller scale. In October of 2011, at the Oak Creek Power Plant just south of Milwaukee, a hillside collapsed, sending dirt, trucks, trailers, and coal ash into Lake Michigan. A debris field about 100 yards long and 80 feet wide. Luckily, no one was injured. A few miles south, down the Lake Michigan shoreline, sits the town of Waukegan, Illinois. Population about 89,000. Dulce Ortiz, a lifelong resident and community activist, is co-chair of Clean Power Lake County.
Waukegan has suffered from industrial pollution. We have 5 Superfund sites. So we've seen the horrors that these companies have done to our community.
One of those 5 Superfund sites is the Johns Manville Corporation Asbestos Disposal Area. It's off limits to the public with warning signs posted, advising people not to create any dust. Just a few hundred yards south is another Superfund site, Waukegan Harbor, once called the world's worst PCB mess. It took years of dredging to remove the deadly toxins, costing taxpayers $150 million to clean up the mess. And now the latest issue for Waukegan residents are 2 coal ash ponds about 100 yards away from the Lake Michigan shoreline. It's the byproduct of burning coal at the huge power plant now owned and operated by NRG Energy. Christine Nanicelli is with the Sierra Club of Illinois.
Coal ash has been contaminating groundwater on the shores of Lake Michigan here for over a decade. Since 2010 was when we first saw groundwater monitoring show elevated levels of a variety of different pollutants.
Although the power plant in Waukegan no longer burns coal to generate electricity, the coal ash ponds remain. Some residents are concerned about possible health effects, and they want the coal ash gone.
Constituents here in the community have been wanting that plant closed going back to the 70s.
Illinois State Representative Rita Mayfield says NRG has resisted these calls, battling regulatory efforts in court and proposing a plan to remove the coal ash from one of the ponds, but cap the other pond and leave the coal ash in place.
So it's not that it can't be done, it's just that they choose not to do it. So they want to cap them in place, leave them there, and then let some future generation deal with it. We're saying no.
NRG did not agree to an on-camera interview, but a spokesman for the company said in an email that the coal ash at the Waukegan site is having no impact on Lake Michigan or the beach, making removal unnecessary, adding that NRG makes protecting the community and environment a priority.
They have not been a good neighbor to this community. I do not believe a word that they say. They are not trustworthy.
Certainly, these companies are looking to do absolutely the bare minimum. In most of these instances, leaving ash in groundwater on site, capping it and walking away, which really presents a critical threat to bodies of water like Lake Michigan right here. We need to see that coal ash properly handled, removed from groundwater, and put in a high and dry, properly permitted landfill away from groundwater resources.
NRG counters that it monitors the groundwater around the ash ponds quarterly, as required by federal law, and that the ash ponds are not causing contamination, and points out that the groundwater in that area is not used for drinking water. While NRG maintains there is no groundwater contamination at the Waukegan plant, the Sierra Club of Illinois says the opposite.
They are checking the water because we get those reports, and we see the ongoing groundwater contamination continuing at the same levels as we did originally in 2010.
Representative Mayfield has introduced legislation that calls for the total removal of all coal ash ponds within 1,000 feet of Lake Michigan.
We can fix this now. We don't want a catastrophe 10 times worse than Flint, Michigan, which is what will happen, because it's not just Illinois that will be poisoned once this coal ash gets in there.
And I think that the public has to start pushing for real regulation and proper storage of this stuff. There's been administration after administration after administration that has done very little.
We're trying to be proactive because we know that our community has suffered so much from industrial polluters that have just gotten their millions of dollars, left the community, left us with just toxic soil that really nothing can be done until it's remediated.
For more about coal ash and where it's being stored around our region, visit greatlakesnow.org/coalash. There, you'll find all the work of Medill journalism students, including Tom Quinn, who reported on one potential solution: beneficial reuse of coal ash. This next segment is based on his story.
In communities around the Great Lakes and around the country, coal ash is a real environmental concern. According to Lisa Evans, an attorney with the environmental advocacy group Earth Justice, it's important that we manage it carefully because coal contains harmful elements.
Coal naturally contains lots of heavy metals, and when you burn it, you concentrate those heavy metals like arsenic, mercury, selenium, thallium, radium, a long list of very, very dangerous and poisonous metals. And it's going to get into the environment if you don't dispose of it properly.
The good news is there is an alternative to disposal. Coal ash from present-day power generation and coal ash from the past that's been stored for decades can be used to create valuable products and materials. And according to Thomas Adams, executive director of the American Coal Ash Association, there is a big environmental incentive for us to get it right.
We have an opportunity to do some really good things from an environmental standpoint to improve our situation in terms of disposal, reduce the amount of material in landfills and ponds, and improve the performance of our infrastructure.
Beneficial reuse of coal ash can save space in landfills, conserve energy, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Jack Grappo, professor of mining at the University of Kentucky, is an expert in the utilization of industrial byproducts. He says the main beneficial use for coal ash is in the production of concrete.
Concrete is an assemblage of coarse and fine aggregate glued together, if you would, with a binder of Portland cement. And fly ash can be used as a substitute for some of the Portland cement.
It's a tried and true practice that was actually used during construction of the Hoover Dam. Substituting fly ash makes the concrete stronger. It helps control heat given off as the concrete cures, and it helps the bottom line.
Portland cement is around $120 a ton right now, when fly ash is significantly less than that. And as well, it has a CO2 benefit because the embodied CO2 burden for producing fly ash has already been consumed through the combustion process, as opposed to Portland cement, which is a very energy-intensive process.
When coal ash is beneficially used in products like concrete and drywall, it undergoes a chemical reaction that encapsulates the dangerous elements found in coal. According to Earth Justice attorney Jenny Castle, this traps the heavy metals and reduces the risk they pose.
The coal ash has been sort of treated chemically, or there's some sort of chemical barrier that is limiting the ability of those metals, right, those dangerous constituents, to leach out of the coal ash into neighboring groundwater or getting into the land.
Encapsulated beneficial use, especially in construction materials, is largely viewed as a safe and effective approach to coal ash management. But encapsulated use isn't the only type of reuse. There's also unencapsulated use, which does not put coal ash through a chemical reaction. Instead, the ash is used as is, predominantly as loose aggregate in road and landscaping projects. Tom Adams says coal ash can be a cost-effective and sustainable option for construction projects.
Transportation is a big factor in what gets selected. So if you've got a power plant that's nearby one of your projects, like we have one here in Indianapolis area right now, where I-69 is going right by a power plant that has material they could be using for a base, that's the best opportunity from a sustainability answer. You've got a product that works, a product that's been proven for years, it's close by, you'll have less impact on the environment by having less trucking.
Despite these benefits, unencapsulated reuse of coal ash is more controversial than encapsulated reuse.
There are no barriers, there's no chemical change, right? There is nothing stopping those dangerous heavy metals from leaching into surface water, draining into groundwater, or leaching into groundwater, or getting into the air, affecting the lungs and harming the bodies of those that breathe it in.
So when you use coal ash in an unencapsulated or loose form, what you're doing is putting a substance that has a lot of dangerous chemicals into the ground, and you're allowing water or rain to flow onto it. When that water percolates through the coal ash, that's going to get into the underlying groundwater. Now, when that water percolates through the ash, it's going to take with it the harmful chemicals.
Professor Grappo disagrees. He considers unencapsulated coal ash safe enough to use in his own home vegetable garden.
It is extremely difficult to leach material from fly ash, which is why I use it in my garden. We have a lot of clay in our soil. It's hard to grow vegetables in clay, so when you tilt fly ash in to the soil, it loosens the soil, much like sand would do the same thing, so the roots can actually grow and develop. And I feed those vegetables to my children, and I don't love my children any less than anybody else loves their children.
Despite the lack of consensus, contamination cases do exist.
A cautionary and very tragic tale is when coal ash was used, quote unquote, beneficially in the town of Pines, which is a small town in northern Indiana. The town of Pines had both a leaking, partially unlined landfill, and then it also had roads built out of coal ash, which were not paved. It had coal ash driveways and paths. It had coal ash playgrounds. And so what we had there was high levels of arsenic in what looked like soil, but was actually either coal ash or coal ash mixed with soil, making that arsenic available to the children playing on the playground. And then all these chemicals leached out of the coal ash and into the town's drinking water wells. It was so bad that EPA came in. They declared the town a Superfund site, and they've been working for 20 years to clean up the groundwater and to remove soil contaminated by coal ash.
Tom Adams of the American Coal Ash Association says the low number of damage cases supports his view that coal ash is safe, and contamination tends to be the result of unethical dumping.
There are some damage cases that are out there, but if you look at them closely, you find that the people that were supposedly doing, say, a structural fill, they were just in disposal. They didn't have an engineered project. They didn't have inspection. They didn't have proper documents to say that they were complying with the current standards or anything. They were just dumping material. So that can hardly be called a beneficial use. That's just dumping, and certainly we're not in favor of that.
To remedy such practices and protect drinking water, Earthjustice encourages regulators to do more to ensure that the rules are followed and public safety maintained.
We have to stop the dumping of coal ash. It costs a lot of money for utilities to dispose of coal ash properly, but they have to do it, because if they don't, we have the injury of communities that are receiving this ash when it's not disposed of properly.
For more about the ways coal ash is being reused, visit greatlakesnow.org/coalash. And now is time for The Catch, which takes you around the Great Lakes to hear from reporters about the issues they're covering. In this episode, we'll hear from Northwestern University student journalists about more of the stories in the project Poisonous Ponds, Tackling a Toxic Legacy.
In Dresden, New York, recent Medill journalism grad Shruti Gopalakrishnan has a story about a Bitcoin mining operation on the shores of Seneca Lake.
Greenwich Generation is a Bitcoin mining plant, which is actually housed in a former coal-fired plant, and when it was operating as a coal plant, it did provide a lot of electricity to the grid. And the story that I'm investigating concentrates on the coal ash that is left behind from its previous operation.
Some of the ash left over from the plant's days burning coal now sits in an unlined pond just a short distance from Seneca Lake. And some locals are concerned about water pollution.
So about 100 residents in the village of Dresden actually draw their water directly from Seneca Lake. They do not depend on any public water system. And one of the residents that I talked to said he's really too scared to just drink that water, so he goes through several cases of water bottles every month.
This fear is heightened by the fact that no government entity monitors or regulates these water sources, unlike municipal drinking water systems. In addition to the legacy contaminants on site, Shruti says the Bitcoin mining operation Greenwich Generation is emitting a lot of its own pollution too.
Greenwich Generation in particular calls itself green because they buy a lot of carbon credits to offset the environmental effects they're having, but in reality, they're also contributing to a lot of kinds of pollution, especially in Seneca Lake, like air pollution, thermal pollution, and water pollution. And the state actually permits them to withdraw 139 million gallons of water each day from the lake, which they then release as warm water.
All of these factors have created tension between nearby residents who are concerned about their health and the health of the environment and Greenidge Generation. Neither Greenidge nor its attorneys responded to multiple requests for comment, and Shruti says New York officials have started to crack down.
On June 30th, the state of New York denied air permit renewals to Greenidge Generation, and environmentalists see this as a way to bring in more stringent laws when it comes to Bitcoin mining operations.
Medill journalism student Sarah I has been reporting on a former limestone quarry in Joliet, Illinois, about 30 miles from Lake Michigan. Owned by energy company NRG, the quarry holds more than 6 million tons of coal ash.
And that coal ash has been contaminating residents' private drinking water wells, which is where they get their drinking water. So environmental lawyers, activists, and residents are pushing for this coal ash to be completely removed from the quarry and transported to a safer landfill.
But whether that will happen remains to be seen. Recently, NRG has proposed capping the unlined quarry and leaving the ash where it is, a procedure known as closure in place. Some say that could contaminate nearby groundwater.
Because the particulate matter is so small and the chemicals are so small, it's very hard to see whether your water is actually contaminated. However, in our analysis of a lot of the energy companies' documents and submissions to the EPA, there were several exceedances of chemicals beyond EPA's safety health thresholds.
For some, these exceedances mean the coal ash should be removed from the site. But according to NRG spokesman Dave Schrader, closure in place provides both short and long-term protection to groundwater and surface water resources, along with ensuring overall protection to public health, welfare, and safety.
It's a battle that will continue in the coming months and in the coming years. So even though there are signs and glimmers of hope, there's definitely still work to be done on the ground.
Sarah says she was drawn to the story of Joliet because of its complexity.
I think it's really important to shine a light on the ways that energy companies have skirted EPA regulations and state regulations for years and years and years, and also the fight that environmental groups on the ground and residents and environmental lawyers have taken to these energy companies to try to find a solution and make a difference.
In Chicago, recent Medill journalism grad Diana Lean is one of several students who worked on a story that provides a national overview of the complications around coal ash regulation.
Coal ash has been produced during the coal burning process for many, many decades at the coal plants in the country, and it's been disposed of in the ground. Some of it has been scattered along land around the sites. For many years, there were little to no regulations or oversight, and that changed in 2015 when the EPA did establish some coal ash regulations.
The 2015 federal rule applies to existing and new coal ash sites, but it exempts landfills that have already closed.
So at the moment, there's a lot of coal ash in the ground that previously wasn't subject to regulations, still potentially might not be subject to regulations if it's some of that legacy ash, which is kind of up in the air regulatorily speaking. And companies' sites don't want to have to excavate all of this coal ash or undertake these massive cleanup efforts that cost a lot of money.
And while this ash sits in more than 700 impoundment lots around the country, there's a risk that the toxins will leach into groundwater, potentially impacting nearby residents' private wells, along with municipal water systems.
The EPA has indicated that they're going to take a more active approach going forward with the sites that are regulated under their current rules. And they indicated this in January when they released some denials of some extension requests from sites for when they would have to stop adding coal ash to unlined impoundments. So that was one of their first steps. And then on the state level, their own environmental agencies are approaching the coal ash issue in very different ways.
And this is where state and local watchdogs and community groups have been playing an important role.
And in certain cases as well, they've helped form new regulations that happened, for example, in Illinois, where environmental groups and residents gave input on new coal ash rules that came into effect in the state in 2021.
Other states with their own coal ash regulations include North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, where there are existing requirements to excavate unlined impoundments of coal ash.
Then on the other hand, there's states such as Indiana, where they're really just going to meet federal regulations, and that seems to be it for the time being. So it's a bit all over the place and a bit of a question, but there should be some action on the front within the next months and years.
Thanks for watching this special collaboration between Great Lakes Now, Energy News Network, and Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, Media, Integrated Marketing Communications. For more on these stories and the Great Lakes in general, visit greatlakesnow.org/coalash. When you get there, you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter to get updates about our work. See you out on the lakes.
This program is brought to you by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation.
The Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
The Richard C. Devereaux Foundation for Energy and Environmental Programs at DPTV. The Polk Family Fund, and viewers like you. Thank you.